Yes. Good morning. All right. So let me just gather myself once again. So this is, you're going to find this funny. So I was probably doing my live session for about 3 minutes, and I was just saying how weird it is to be starting a live session with no technical glitches whatsoever. And it was almost boring, and hopefully I've got enough energy to do this session because I've been used to having a lot of adrenaline pumping around my system because I'm trying to fix things before I go on. And I realized I was talking to the void. so, so it's in my destiny to never be able to start on time, to always have some issue that I need to deal with and use my mindfulness skills to overcome. So there you go. All right. So that was my little story for the day. But yeah, I'm actually not that stressed out about it today because I'm kind of used to it by now. So it's all good. So I'm going to have a little glass of water and then I am going to start. All right. Thank you very much, Mary Beth Weber. Is it Weber or Weber? You see, my mother's family, my mother's lineage, we're Germans, and we are Weber. So yeah, we're the Webers from Plittersdorf in Bonn. So I don't know where you are, Mary Beth Weber or Weber, but yeah, hello. We're probably linked somewhere along the lines in our family tree. But yeah, I'm glad you love the meditations. Appreciate your lovely comments. All right, let's get into it. So I've got a question for you, maybe a couple of questions for you. Have you ever spent hours replaying a scenario in your head, trying to find that perfect answer, only to end up exhausted and no closer to a decision? Or do you find yourself stuck in thought loops that never seem to end? So I'm assuming a few of you are nodding. And if you are nodding, and if you are constantly second guessing yourself or overwhelmed by anxious thoughts, or find yourself frequently slipping into analysis paralysis, then you're exactly where you need to be today. In this session, we're going to dive into exactly why your brain gets trapped in these loops, and most importantly, how you can break free of overthinking. Now, I'm going to share practical, science backed tools that I use every day with myself and my clients. And they're going to be real world strategies to interrupt that overthinking so that you can finally get some mental peace. And these aren't just theories, right? These are actionable tools that you'll be able to start using immediately. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Chibs Okereke. I'm a stress and burnout coach. I'm a mindfulness facilitator, and I'm one of the meditation instructors and narrators on the Calm app. And I can hear a lot of action going on behind me there. And that's in the background there. That's Olive and that's Z. Z's the one who's moving around the side of the screen. I can hear her snorting and sniffling, but I'm not sure what you can hear. I think I've got quite a good mic, so maybe you can only just hear me, but I can hear her in the background. So hopefully she won't be distracting myself or any of you. If we are, whatever, we deal with it as per usual. All right. So as always, hello doggies, yes. As always, we're going to walk through my simple 5-step framework that will allow you to tackle overthinking head on. So we'll start by learning why your brain gets stuck in overthinking loops in the first place. I'll show you how to quickly catch yourself when you're slipping into that overthinking mode so that you can interrupt it early. You're going to learn how to use mindfulness to sit with your uncomfortable thoughts and feelings without spiraling even further. I'm going to give you a number of practical tools that will help you make clearer, more confident decisions. And then finally, we'll talk about how to reflect on what you've done, how to continuously refine your approach so that you can build resilience and that lasting change. All right, let's dive in. So, first things first, what exactly do we mean by overthinking? Because it's important that we're on the same page. So, when I think about overthinking, when I talk about overthinking, let's try not to do too much thinking. But when I think or talk about overthinking, see, I'm overthinking it right now. Breathe. Okay. I'm not talking about being thoughtful or careful or analytical, right? That's just thinking. And thinking is good, right? We've got these beautiful big brains of ours. Thinking is good. Overthinking is when your mind gets trapped in repetitive loops of thoughts. So that could be worrying about future outcomes, it could be replaying past conversations, or obsessively weighing every possible choice until you're completely exhausted or paralyzed. And it's also worth mentioning overthinking isn't always about making decisions. So it could be replaying old scenarios like the conversation that you had last week or the conversation that you had years ago. So memories that you can't change, but you keep mentally reliving anyway. Or it might be your mind jumping to worst case scenarios, right? So that catastrophizing, imagining everything that could go wrong, even if nothing's happened yet. So it's these kinds of looping, repetitive, or negative thought patterns that drain your energy and steal your peace. Now, one of our subscribers, so Elizabeth Gardner, she commented on one of my posts recently, and she said that she had problems with overthinking and imagining the worst case scenario. And she said, from memory, despite the stories never ever coming true, she still never learns, right? And I think that so many of us can relate to that. You know, so many of us have told ourselves so many scary stories, right? But how often do they actually happen? And yet our brains keep rehearsing them as if our. You right there, Z? Z's piping up. You know, so they very rarely, if at all, actually happen. And yet our brains keep rehearsing them as if our anxiety is somehow going to protect us. So, why is it that we do this? You know, why do we overthink? Why do our brains insist on torturing us with these endless loops? Well, for some of us, especially those of us who grew up in less than ideal or unsafe environments, perhaps we needed to anticipate problems, or maybe we needed to avoid conflict, or we needed to have the ability to read the moods of others. In those cases, overthinking would have probably started off as a protective strategy. It would have given us a sense of control in situations that may have felt unpredictable or unsafe. So our brains would have learned at a very early age that thinking more could help keep us safe, help keep us prepared, and help keep us out of trouble. But of course, this session isn't all about me and my childhood issues. not not all overthinking stems from childhood or trauma. Many people are simply born with analytical minds. Okay, maybe we're born a little bit perfectionistic tendencies, and some people simply can't bear uncertainty. Okay, but whether our overthinking is something that we were born with, or if it was something that was created by our environment, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. In fact, our analytical nature can be a huge advantage in a lot of cases. If you are an overthinker, and I'm assuming that you are because you're watching today, it's not a flaw. It's probably what makes you good at your job. It's probably what makes you great at problem solving. And maybe it's what makes you effective in navigating complex situations. But here's the thing, those traits, all right, so thoughtfulness, being analytical, wanting to get it exactly right, They can be strengths. They can help us problem solve, be creative, make smart decisions. But like any strength, when we dial that up too high, those strengths can start to backfire. So at some point, this thoughtfulness will probably tip over into anxiety or rumination or decision paralysis. So this habit of overthinking can trick us into believing that we're being responsible when really we're just stuck in a loop, pretending that we're making progress. So step one is recognizing that overthinking once served a purpose, keeping you safe, prepared, and alert, but now it's often causing more harm than good. So before we move on to step two, let's make sure that this is landed, right? So I want you to recognize that overthinking might have served you once, but it's potentially not serving you now. And overthinking might serve us in particular situations, but overthinking isn't helpful all the time. Okay. All right. Next up, let's explore how you can catch your overthinking before it takes over. Yeah, and Kate says unconscious old stories from the past. Yeah. Yeah. Past already happened, nothing we can do about it. And yet we can replay it on loop, on loop, on loop. And we're rehearsing old situations that probably will never, ever happen again. But this is our brain trying to protect us, trying to prepare us for any future danger. All right, so now that we understand why your brain gets stuck in these loops, let's talk about how you can catch yourself slipping into overthinking mode. Because if we think about it, right, overthinking usually happens on autopilot, right? It happens outside of our awareness, like in the unconscious, as Kate was saying. You start thinking about something, and then before you know it, you've spent an hour stuck in your head. You're exhausted, you don't know how you got there, and you probably haven't made any decisions. So that's why awareness really is your superpower. So just recognizing that you're caught in an overthinking spiral gives you the ability to interrupt it and to change course. So what do you do to catch yourself overthinking, right? Well, here's a simple and powerful little phrase that you can use. Now, as soon as you notice that your mind's racing, once you catch yourself spiraling, you can pause and you can ask yourself, is this thought helpful or is it just habit? Or an even more simple question, am I thinking or am I overthinking? Now, these questions cut right to the heart of overthinking. It gives you an instant checkpoint. So if the thought is genuinely helping you find clarity, great. That's thinking. Carry on. But if you realize that your thoughts are just spinning your wheels, they're fueling your anxiety or they're keeping you stuck, it's time to label it clearly. This is overthinking. Make sense? So ask yourself, is this thought helpful or is it just habit? Is it thinking? Is it overthinking? And before we move on to stage three, let's quickly talk about triggers, because once you know your triggers, it's easier to catch yourself. Now, from my experience and the experience of my clients, common triggers include receiving a vague email or text message from your boss or partner. So you're like, oh, wait, what's going on here? Does this mean that they're unhappy? Spiral. Or replaying something that you said in a meeting, right? Worrying if it came across the wrong way. Or maybe for me, I could, replay something that I might have said in a YouTube live and, oh, how did that go? And was that even funny or was that inappropriate? Whatever. And I can catch myself in a loop if I'm not thinking. Another trigger might be when you've had a tricky conversation with someone, right? So you might be wondering if you said the wrong thing. And then an obvious one, of course, is when you have a big decision to make. That's when overthinking can become a problem. And another one is when you're dealing with uncertainty and you're not sure what's going to happen next. Now, I wish I could remember exactly what he said, and I tried to find it beforehand and I couldn't locate the quote anywhere. But Alan Watts said something in one of his lectures, and he said something along the lines of, we spend hours agonizing over our choices, right? So we're meticulously weighing up the pros and the cons. And then in the end, we end up making a snap decision. And maybe, excuse me. And if anyone knows anything about long COVID, let me know. I'm starting to think I've got something going on. So if you've got any long COVID experts in the, because I had COVID a few months ago and I've never been the same since, which is not great because my voice is my moneymaker, right? Without this, I'm screwed. Maybe I'll get an AI voice to take over. But anyway, so, and maybe this is a bit of a simplistic way of looking at things, but if I'm honest with myself, most of the time, deep down, I already know what I want. And all that extra analysis and weighing up the pros and the cons and looking at every single possible outcome, it's usually just my brain desperately seeking reassurance. But on the other hand, if deep down I don't know what I want, then probably it's not going to be that big a deal one way or the other. So why not just make a decision and move on? It's probably not worth spending 10 minutes deciding which laundry detergent to get or what flavor ice cream to get or whether to get the silver kettle or the black kettle, right? Which I have got. Well, I've been in analysis paralysis about that at some point, right? Just deciding what color thing to get. All right. So yeah, just get the one that's on special offer and be done with it. So catching yourself overthinking early means that you can gently remind yourself, I know what I need. This overthinking is just noise and distraction. But of course, our overthinking is usually happening on autopilot without us even realizing it, right? So if you're someone who finds it hard to catch overthinking in the moment, one simple technique that I recommend is to do a quick check-in at set points during the day. So you can ask yourself, where's my attention right now? You can even set a phone reminder or use post-it notes, or you can use visual cues. So like every time you wash your hands or make a cup of tea, to pause and scan your thoughts and check in. So the more often you check in, the more natural it becomes to notice when you're slipping into that spiral. All right, let's see. I have a chronic illness and I overthink about the lack of control I have and what will happen to me in the future. Yeah, so it's that uncertainty, right? And some of us are not good with uncertainty. We want to basically control our outcome, which is, of course, very difficult, if not impossible to do. So our mind is trying to help us. Okay. So even though it feels painful, the mind is doing what it knows to do to keep us safe, or what it thinks is keeping us safe. So this is what we're talking about today. And hopefully you can have some tools to help you with that, Miss Laurie. So, all right. So we've learned about we've learned about how we overthink, why we overthink in the first place, and now let's say you've caught yourself in the act of overthinking. You've noticed you're overthinking. What comes next? Now, for you impatient ones out there, for those of you that are always in a hurry, and yeah, that's me, guilty as charged, your urge will probably be to move to fix your overthinking. So to bring in the tool that will help. So now what I would gently suggest is that the tool should come out at stage 4. Okay. And I would suggest that you spend a bit of time on stage 3. And this is the part where mindfulness becomes your best friend. And let me quickly clarify what mindfulness actually means in this context, because there seems to be a bit of misunderstanding about the definition. Now, mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts altogether or clearing your mind of thoughts. It's about changing your relationship with your thoughts and becoming aware of your thoughts. So think of mindfulness as becoming an observer of your thoughts rather than the one engaging in your thoughts. So instead of getting tangled up in the anxious chatter, you're stepping back, you're noticing the thoughts clearly, and you're allowing them to pass. Because the annoying thing is, right, when we fight our intrusive or repetitive or negative thoughts, when we try to push them away, we can actually end up feeding them. So the trick is to gently acknowledge them for what they are, right? They're just thoughts. And the thoughts might be true, but they might not be. Or maybe they're a partial truth and the thought is distorted somehow by fear or by stress or by old habits. So as you sit back and you observe the thought, some people find it helpful also to label the thought. So you could say, this is anxiety, or this is rumination, or this is worry. And then you can remind yourself that these thoughts are temporary. Thoughts will come and thoughts will go. So just to be clear, you can just sit with the thoughts and do nothing, just be with the thoughts, not trying to do anything. Or you can try labeling the thoughts. Anxiety, worry, rumination. So, and yeah, let's just be clear on the steps. Okay, so just to be clear. So first, clearly label the thought. This is if you want to label, you want to take it that step further. Clearly label the thought or feeling as soon as you notice it. So for example, as I said, this is anxiety, or this is overthinking again. Once you've labeled the thought, you can anchor yourself with a simple breathing technique. So you can take slow, calm, deliberate breaths. So just, even if you just do 3 slow, deep breaths, that can start to shift your emotional state. And then when your body starts to calm down, often the mind will start to calm down too. And then finally, you can remind yourself that all thoughts and feelings, even uncomfortable ones, are temporary. So just like clouds passing through the sky, your thoughts are going to move on naturally if you allow them to. Now, this practice isn't just nice to do. It's backed by neuroscience. So studies show that mindfulness genuinely changes those neural pathways in your brain. It reduces your stress response, it lowers anxiety, and it increases your emotional resilience over time. So in other words, the more you practice sitting with discomfort and sitting with uncomfortable thoughts, rather than pushing them away or getting caught up in them, the easier it becomes to manage them calmly and confidently. All right, so we've learned why overthinking happens. We've caught ourselves in the act. We've hopefully sat with our thoughts for a bit, or we've been impatient and we've skipped the mindfulness part. Now what? So let's talk about practical tools that you can use to interrupt that cycle of overthinking. Now, you don't have to learn every tool that I'm going to show you, right? Unless you want to. But I'd suggest picking the 1 or 2 that resonate best with you and then making that your go-to strategy for taking action, for getting unstuck, and for regaining control over your mind. Now, I'm going to share 4 techniques with you today, starting with probably the simplest and moving to the most comprehensive so that you can choose what suits your situation best. Now, the first technique is called the 10-10-10 rule. And this is super simple, super easy to remember. And I absolutely love this one. And so many times I can catch my thought, I can bring in this 10-10-10 rule, and everything suddenly seems to be okay. I even used it this morning. I won't go into the story of it. I've got enough to talk about, but I used it this morning. But yeah, so when you catch yourself spiraling, I want you to pause, and ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes? Will this matter in 10 days? Will this matter in 10 years? So this rule is a quick way to zoom out and get very, very quick perspective. See, overthinking tends to shrink our focus, right? So we fixate on one moment, one sentence, one decision, as if everything depends on it. But when we ask these 3 questions, we shift our thinking from urgency to impact. So let's say you're obsessing over whether you said the wrong thing in a meeting, right? So you're looping through every word you said, you're thinking about the tone, you're thinking about the facial expressions, the body language of everyone else around you, and you're replaying it on loop. Or as it was today, you wake up and all the plates were in the sink and your daughter was supposed to have cleaned up last night. But when you stop and ask, will this matter in 10 minutes, in 10 days, in 10 years? You usually realize that it won't, right? People forget, context fades, life moves on. And most of the time, it's not nearly as big a deal as your brain is making it out to be. So this 10-10-10 tool is a quick perspective reset button, right? So it doesn't erase the worry, but it helps you detach from it and move on more easily. And I was so fascinated how quickly I just went, will it matter in 10 minutes? No, it won't even matter in 10 minutes, because she will have cleared it up in the morning. So such a great tool. So I really recommend that 10-10-10 rule. The second technique I'll use when I catch myself overthinking for too long, and let's say I don't seem to be getting anywhere, is to set a time limit for me to make my decision. And so this is why the sit with it stage is so useful as well. This is why the mindfulness can really come into play here. Because if we spend a bit of time doing some mindfulness or some deep breathing to calm the body down, then we'll probably have a better perspective at this point. Because not every decision deserves hours of contemplation. But when we're stressed, every little decision feels important. And, another story that springs to mind. So the other day, I noticed that I was out with my daughter ordering dinner, and I was trying to decide what Thai dish I was going to have. And it seemed really, really important to choose the right dish to complement the dish that Ziggy had just ordered. No doubt because I was stressed out about something else that was going on and nothing to do with my food. And so I caught myself overthinking, right? So I caught myself overthinking. So I gave myself a time limit. Now, for low stakes choices like choosing what Thai food to get, just give yourself 60 seconds. For medium stakes choices, maybe 5 minutes. For bigger decisions, gather the essential information, set a firm deadline, and stick to it. So this approach breaks the habit of endless analysis and forces you into action. And then over time, you'll see that the decisions I've made were generally good ones. The bad decisions I make didn't ruin my life, or the world didn't end. So over time, that's going to build your confidence in decision making. Now, the third and the fastest way to break free from analysis paralysis is to just do something, anything. Doesn't have to be perfect, just take one small step forward. Action brings clarity, it brings confidence, and it brings momentum. And clarity rarely comes from more thinking, it comes from doing. But this is more, even though it's simple, it's an advanced technique. You're probably going to be too anxious to do this straight off the bat. So I'd suggest that once you've got one of the previous techniques down, you can start experiment with just using your gut and going for it, making those snap decisions. Now, if overthinking and worry regularly hijack your day, then I'd suggest you start doing scheduled worry time. Now, this is one of the most powerful tools in my toolkit, and I've taught this tool to so many of my clients, and it's been a game changer for so many of them. Now, scheduled worry time is a well-researched technique used in cognitive behavioral therapy, so CBT. Therapists use it to help people manage anxiety, to manage rumination and chronic worry in a more structured in a more structured and healthy way. And it works like this. Dramatic pause. I want you to set aside 10 to 15 minutes each day dedicated entirely to worry or rumination. So during this time, you have my complete permission to worry and overthink as much as you like. Outside of your scheduled worry time, however, whenever anxious thoughts or worries pop up during the day, gently postpone them to your scheduled time. You can write them down in your worry list, and then you can give yourself permission to let that thought go until your scheduled time. Then, during your worry time, allow yourself to fully engage. You can write your thoughts down, you can make a plan, or you can simply sit and worry. And why does this work so well? Well, because it teaches your brain clear boundaries. So instead of treating every anxious thought like an emergency that needs to be solved right now, you're training your mind to delay that response. And then over time, this rewires your relationship with worry. It loses its urgency over time. And so what's really interesting is that sometimes when your scheduled worry time rolls around, so mine would be if I've got a lot going on, I bring in my scheduled worry time, and mine's usually about from 6 o'clock to 6:15. And what's really interesting is that sometimes when your scheduled worry time rolls around, those same thoughts that felt so loud and important at 12 p.m. that day suddenly don't feel so important. They've faded, or the problem has already resolved itself by itself. Now, the amount of times that my scheduled worry time has come around and the thing that I was worried about, someone's already dealt with it for me. It's pretty amazing. So either way, you win. You've taken back control of when and how you engage with your thoughts, rather than letting your thoughts run the show all day. So the key takeaway for this section is you can't always control the thoughts that arise. In fact, you probably can never control the thoughts that arise, but you absolutely can control how you respond to them. All right, so now you've got a few practical tools and strategies for interrupting those draining, overthinking thought loops, but the journey doesn't end here. Reflection is so important because this is how you build real resilience and fine-tune your approach and establish a new, healthier habit over time. So trying this new response once, right? So 10, 10, 10, everyone's going to be like, oh, that's a great idea. Cool. I'm glad you like it. And please start using it. But trying a new response once, trying a new tool once won't magically fix everything. Real change comes from consistent, repeated practice over and over again. And that's where this reflection stage can help. So after you've responded, maybe you've used the 10-10-10 technique, as I can see a lot of people are liking in the chat. Maybe you've set a time limit on making a decision. After you've done that, I want you to pause and ask yourself, either in your head or even better, writing it down. And just remember, reflection isn't about self-criticism, okay? It's about gentle curiosity. So after you've tried using the tools from earlier, pause and simply ask yourself these questions. Did my overthinking help me or hurt me in this situation? Did my quicker, more intuitive decision work out well or not so well? And then what can I adjust or what can I do differently next time? So the key here is gentle honesty. And this reflection stage isn't about self-criticism, right? Sometimes your quick decisions will work out great. And if everything worked out great, celebrate your win. That's proof that you're building a healthier habit, and you'll be more motivated to use that tool again next time. If your new tool didn't work out so well, that's okay too. It's feedback for next time. And that feedback is valuable. So maybe you realize that you waited too long to make a decision, and so next time you'll try setting a time limit. Or perhaps you caught yourself overthinking, but you didn't actually pause to label the thought, and next time you're going to bring in labeling, right? So it's all useful. The goal isn't to get it perfect, it's to keep noticing, to keep adjusting, and keep building that self-trust. All right. So the key is to keep reflecting and refining. So reflection isn't necessarily the final step. It loops you back to the learn it stage, stage one. Okay. So every time you notice what worked for you and what didn't, you're learning how to better catch your overthinking next time. And you're working out better ways or experimenting with different tools to respond in a helpful way that supports you. And each time you go through this process, you're strengthening those healthy pathways, right? You're strengthening those neural networks. You're building habits that feel productive and sustainable. And so this is how you move from overthinking by default to responding with clarity and confidence. And I just want to mention someone else's comment, because I think this is really interesting. So I put a post up asking, as I do each week, asking for questions that I can cover in today's session. And Kate commented saying that as she shifts into I think Kate's on today, aren't you? Yes, you are. Kate commented saying that as she shifts into a healthier, more grounded version of herself, she's noticed the people around her becoming more reactive. And she asked, how do I keep flowing forward without feeling the weight of those around me? And I think that's such a powerful reflection, because the truth is, when we stop overthinking, when we stop people pleasing, when we stop being a perfectionist, when we stop doing, overdoing, and we start trusting ourselves, it can start to disrupt the dynamic around us. So not everyone's going to applaud your growth, and that can feel guilt-inducing at times. And then maybe you've got guilty thoughts now going on loop, and uncertainty going around on loop. But that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, right? So remember, thoughts are just thoughts. Those guilty thoughts might just mean that you're finally prioritizing your own peace over someone else's comfort. So part of this work isn't just learning to quiet the noise in our heads, it's learning to stay centered even when others don't understand the changes that we're making. Because remember, you've likely spent years, maybe even decades, building up these mental habits. So changing them takes practice and compassion, not perfection. Every small moment of awareness, every gentle redirection, and every calm decision is progress. Now, freeing yourself from overthinking isn't about never doubting yourself again, right? It's about noticing when you're stuck and choosing something different. It's about gently catching those loops, sitting with the discomfort, and reminding yourself that clarity comes from practice, okay? And you don't have to get it right every single time. You just have to keep showing up for yourself, thought by thought, day by day. All right, so we've covered a lot today. So let me just, before we end, I'll quickly summarize what we've talked about. We learned how our brains get stuck in loops of overthinking, whether it's rooted in childhood patterns or analytical tendencies, or maybe we just have anxiety about uncertainty. We've talked about catching ourselves, so noticing when we're slipping into overthinking mode. We said that when we do catch our overthinking, we pause and we check in. We ask ourselves, is this thought helpful, or is it just habit? Is this thinking? Is this overthinking? We then sit with it. We mindfully acknowledge our uncomfortable thoughts or feelings without fighting them. And we can even label those thoughts and feelings if we want to. So this is anxiety, this is rumination, this is just my mind trying to protect me. We then respond with practical, actionable tools to interrupt our overthinking. And the tools that we learned today were the 10-10-10 rule, setting a time limit on our decisions, deciding quickly, deciding with our gut, and then my personal favorite, scheduled worry time, where we intentionally carve out space to worry on purpose instead of letting it take over our entire day. And then finally, we discussed the benefits of regularly reflecting on our experiences so that we get better over time and the new healthy habit gets ingrained. We can reflect on what worked, what didn't, and we might reflect on what we might try differently next time. All right. So progress isn't perfection, small steps forward. Ultimately, breaking free from overthinking is about those small, sustainable changes, right? So every time you catch yourself and you respond with a different way of thinking, you're retraining your brain. You're creating a new neural pathway so that you can make clear, quick, positive, effective decisions. So that was my framework. So we got learn it, catch it, sit with it, respond, reflect. It's a simple step-by-step approach to breaking free from overthinking, helping you to quiet the mental noise without losing the analytical, problem-solving thoughtfulness that makes you great at what you do. Now, I'd love to hear from you in the chat or the comments. So what's one specific situation this week where you're going to practice making quicker, more intuitive decisions? Or perhaps you're excited to try scheduled worry time. So, let me know in the comments. I always read the comments, and your insights and your questions really do help me to create better content. If people aren't asking me the questions in the post, so I'm going to put a post up after this in the next couple of days saying what my next session is going to be. And I'd love you to go to my post and ask me questions that you want answered about that topic. And then I can make sure, as I did today, I can make sure I integrate those questions into the session, because I don't always know what is useful, and it helps me to shape my content. Now, if you did find this session useful, please, hit the like button. Oh God, I'm starting to sound like a YouTuber now. Smash those like buttons. Please subscribe if you haven't done already. And also hit the notification bell. Oh, my voice seems to relax the pups too. Yeah, they've chilled out. But yeah, and if you hit the notification bell, then you'll get alerted when I'm doing my weekly live stream. And if there's someone that you know who's stuck in their own loop of overthinking, then why not share this video with them? And finally, if you do want to go deeper and get access to all my guided meditations, ad free, and you can download them to your phone, and you can also join me for a fortnightly Q&A, you can head over to chibsmeditations.com and you can sign up to be a premium subscriber. There's a 7-day free trial, and then it's just under $5 a month to be a member. So we're not going to have time for questions today because I've kind of gone over time, and I've got my premium subscriber live session right now. So all my supporters you would have received your link. Well, it's the same link from last week as well. You can join me on the Zoom chat next. And yeah, thank you so much. Please ask any other questions in the comments, and make sure to go to my post next time and ask me any questions that you want answered in the next session. So I'm probably not going to do a session like this next week, but I might do a guided meditation because I've got a course all weekend, but I'll definitely do another presentation style, educational style video in 2 weeks' time. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Chibzo Kereke, and I'll see you next time. And I'll see my premium supporters in about 5 minutes when I've had a glass of water, but I will switch the Zoom on shortly. All right, take care. I'll see you next time. Okay, now I need to find out how to end stream. Stay with me for a couple more seconds. There we go. All right, stop streaming.